Billy Tarascio with the Modern Divorce Podcast, joined again by one of my repeat and favorite guests, Ryan Claridge. Ryan, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me again.
Always, always. So Ryan had an idea for our podcast this week to talk about DUIs and the impact that DUIs have in family court. And it's such a good idea because it comes up so often. And depending on the circumstances, it can either mean nothing or it can mean everything. So, Ryan, where should we start?
The beginning is always a great place to start. A lot of people, when they are going through a divorce, they do have, other tangential things going on in their life or their past. And sometimes that is a DUI, or sometimes they're concerned that the other party has a DUI. So we want to talk about, when a DUI can be very impactful in your case, and then when it might not be. And then just general advice on, how to behave in general during your divorce and how catastrophic it might be if you get a DUI during your divorce process and some of the consequences there. And even in absence of a DUI, what you might be able to do to keep your children safe if you have reason to believe the other party is abusing alcohol.
All right, so let's start with this. If you come into my office and you say the other party has a DUI, it's not a smoking gun. The first question I have for you is, or if you say to me, Billy, I got a DUI, what's this going to do to my case? If you are getting a divorce and there's no children involved, then the DUI usually doesn't have any impact, except you've got a case right now, Ryan, where one of the opposing parties is saying she needs spousal maintenance because she's an alcoholic and can't work, right?
That case does involve children.
Mm.
She did not get an interlock device on her car because all of her parenting time is going to be supervised. But the opposing party agreed to kind of a ramp up parenting plan, and she agreed to something called Soberlink testing. And essentially, the longer she tests clean, abstains from alcohol, the more parenting time she gets. So presumably, she would be on a path to, being more stable and being able to see the children without supervision. She also claimed that because she was such a drunk, she wouldn't be able to find a job, so she needed spousal maintenance. Cases that don't involve children, generally, any kind of criminal conduct, anything that makes you look bad around the time of your case, can be used against you. So if your judgment is that issue, if you're, if you have a 50-50 issue, the judge might think, well, both sides have pretty reasonable arguments, but one side just got arrested for a DUI. So they might rule against you there. That could be rare, but your whole life is kind of on trial when you're going through the litigation process. So it's never a good idea to get a DUI, but it could be very, very bad if you get one during or around the time of your divorce as well.
And unfortunately, that happens with a certain amount of frequency. And it's either a catalyst that causes somebody to file for divorce, or the trauma of divorce causes people to make bad decisions and get a DUI. It happens a lot. And the statute says if you've gotten a DUI within the last 12 months, or if you've been convicted of a drug offense within the last 12 months, there is a presumption that you should not be awarded sole legal decision-making or joint legal decision-making. Now, that does not mean that presumption can't be overcome, but your starting point is not equal anymore.
If you have a history of drinking and driving, before we get into Soberlink, one thing the other party can ask for, or you can ask for, is to have an ignition interlock device placed into the car, right? So that way the court knows, all third parties know, the parents know that presumably before you get in the car to drive your children or pick up your children, every time you get in the car, you have to blow clean, right? Those can be ordered on a criminal case as part of your probation for a DUI, or you can just, be asked to get one by a family judge or by agreement. So if you've had a DUI recently, this is something that, you might be looking at. And there's a pretty significant cost to that. I believe you rent the machine and you pay like a monthly fee. Have you ever had a client have to do that, Billy?
Yes, I have. And I've also represented clients where I've asked that the other party use SoberLink or an interlock device. And so we should talk about the difference between that. So um, there are a few dangers when a parent is abusing alcohol. One, of course, is drinking and driving. The other is abuse and neglect while you're drunk. And so
Right.
the interlock device is great because it can prevent you from drinking and driving. The SoberLink ensures that you are sober while you have your children during your parenting time. And this can be a way to overcome that presumption. So if the court has to decide that the presumption applies, and let's say dad's the alcoholic, and mom then has a presumption for getting sole legal decision making, and there's a presumption against dad for joint legal decision making, he may be able to overcome that by saying, look, this was an isolated incident. I'm in treatment, I'm sober, and I'm willing to use SoberLink. When you go above and beyond, that can be enough to get over the presumption against you.
Right. So a lot of times you'll see on a temporary orders basis, the party who has a recent DUI or is being accused of being alcoholic will do SoberLink. And what SoberLink is, it's a breathalyzer essentially that you have at home. It's a device. Again, you rent it, you pay per month, and you return the device at the end of the period. Usually you have to blow into it before, during, and immediately after your parenting time, right? So, and the other party or their attorney gets pretty much real-time results. So that is a very effective way to, if you're trying to exonerate yourself, or if you have concerns, to have it monitored. There's very few false positives. But if there is a problem with the machine, you can reset it, or you can go get a test somewhere else. But it's very, very, very convenient. It doesn't rely on the parties having to go to a testing site or doing a urine test or a blood test or anything. It's designed to be pretty simple. Absent a DUI and absent really, really objective evidence, if you're asking the other party to do alcohol testing, then usually, most skilled attorneys will say, well, then you do as well. Or they'll say, sure, my client will do the testing, but if he or she is clean, you have to pay for it. So alcohol is not illegal. Drinking is not illegal. Drinking and driving is illegal, but drinking socially, drinking around your kids to a certain extent is not illegal. So if you're going to make the allegation that your ex-partner is drunk, is drinking too much, then be prepared to also sign up for some sort of alcohol testing.
And unsubstantiated allegations rarely go anywhere in Arizona family court. Like in Arizona family court, if I have a client come to me and say, I think he's going to be dangerous because he has unprocessed trauma, or I think he's going to be, I think he might make bad decisions because he's never watched the kids alone before. That is so speculative that you are very unlikely to get traction. Now, let's talk about the different types of alcohol testing, because before SoberLink, which I agree is like it's such a wonderful technology. People had to go. First of all, people were ordered to abstain from alcohol all the time. And we know with true alcoholics just how hard and dangerous even that can be. And so they had to go somewhere, leave work, go pee in front of an individual at a facility and pay for it. Humiliating, invasive, just a pretty awful situation. SoberLink allows you in the privacy of your home to abstain from alcohol during the time periods that you have your children. It's much less invasive. And so if you are faced with that, if you are on the fence, and if there is some evidence against you, let's say several DUIs or pictures of you passed out with the kids, you are probably better off, or might be better off, agreeing to use SoberLink for a period of time. Judges rarely keep it in place long term. Usually after a certain amount of time with no mess ups, it's gone.
Also, in addition to being less invasive, right, the results go directly to the other party. So say you're concerned, instead of going to the testing center and then posted to the judge and then released online. So say your pickup time is, you're going to drop the kids off like Friday at 4 p.m. and you get a missed test from the other party at like 3 p.m. Well, then you don't have to get in the car, because usually what happens is if you have a missed test, you have to show either sometimes it's a week of clean tests, sometimes it's 48 hours of clean tests, but it just happens automatically and there's really no need for court involvement. The only time that the court has to get involved if there's something really, really rare, like an error with the machine and the machine is broken. But it's just a lot faster. And it really, although it might seem like this device is in your house, it's much more personal. It might seem a little bit more invasive. If you use it correctly, it's actually not, right? I don't believe the judges get a copy of the records, just the other party. Right. Obviously, the other party is going to turn you in if you fail the test, but it really gives the user a lot of autonomy.
The other thing is, with an interlock device on a car, we've all heard the stories of the person who's supposed to be blowing doesn't blow and has the girlfriend or the boyfriend or the kid blow. And that goes away with Soberlink because you blow, it attaches to your phone and the phone takes a picture of you while you're blowing. It's really cool technology. Now, that doesn't help if we've got somebody who's not an alcoholic, but they're still addicted to drugs, or they may have gotten a DUI for something, even prescription drugs that are legal, you can still get a DUI. So does the court treat alcohol DUIs the same as drug or prescription drug DUIs?
Yes, they do. Although, alcohol is probably the oldest and most commonly consumed drug, right? So the testing for it, the case law on it, and just everyone's experience on it is the same. Yes, they are sober as a judge, but I'm going to bet that every judge in Maricopa County has been drunk before. I'm going to guess that every judge in Maricopa County has.
We have some LDS
both of them.
Judges,
or they're at least familiar with the effects of alcohol.
Right.
Most judges probably haven't gotten high out of their minds on marijuana. I'm sure very few of them have done heroin or other drugs, right? And then when you're talking about prescription drug use, the great thing about alcohol is that whether fair or not, everyone seems to know that 0.08 is inebriated, can't drive, right? We don't know how much hydroxycodone or whatever in your system is impairment. So a lot of times when you're accused of a DUI for prescription drugs, then what you can expect is that every time you get a prescription drug, even if you go to different doctors, the state of Arizona keeps a record of it. So if it shows that you're doctor shopping, if it shows that you have conflicting prescriptions, that is going to be a problem for you. And you might be ordered to do drug testing. Everything might show up as perfectly legal on its own, but maybe not in the combination of. So, and then again, the experts, the case law, and the judge's own experience on more nuanced narcotics and prescription drugs is just not as comprehensive as it is alcohol. So a judge can get really easily confused. You can be on a bunch of prescriptions that are perfectly legal, but trying to explain that to the judge after having DUI, they might order you to, get all your prescriptions renewed, go to drug counseling, and figure out what you absolutely need. And any levels of those types of abuses showing up could be very problematic.
I agree with you. In some ways, it can either be more or less problematic. If you were taking, a sleeping pill for the first time and had a bad reaction and now you're not taking it anymore, that's fairly easy for us to explain away and the issue's resolved. If you're being accused of being a drug addict who is also prescribed medication, judges are in a really tough position because many of them are severely concerned, especially when you bring up opioids like fentanyl. Judges can be extremely concerned, and their only remedy there, because there is no Soberlink, is you test clean or you don't get your kids.
Right. Or you test clean, or all your parenting time is supervised. You're not allowed to drive with your kids because the judges are just going to be as safe as possible. The more complicated the drug, anything beyond alcohol is confusing to judges, I think. The harder it might be to get out of that situation.
Absolutely. And proactively speaking, if you can bring us or your attorneys, or if you're representing yourself, all of the prescription records, if you can show I've used one doctor, I'm renewing my prescription on a monthly basis. I'm not using more than was prescribed. You're going to have a much better time than the many people who are struggling with opioid addiction and do have multiple doctors and kind of a rough history. It's very hard for them without being clean to truly do well and explain their situation in family court.
Right. And then if you had DUI or you're being accused of alcoholism, and the other party is saying you're a risk, understand that that is not enough to take away your parenting time. And the court is not punishing you. The court is giving you a chance to prove that you care more about your kids than you do about drinking, or that you can drink responsibly. What the court doesn't want is your kids to get hurt in an accident. And what the court also doesn't want is you to not be involved in the kid's life, either because something happened to you or you chose drinking over your children. So yes, it can be invasive. Yes, it can be a pain in the butt. And maybe your ex is just doing it to be spiteful. But if you can think about, if you do this, blow into this device for a certain amount of time and you kind of change your drinking habits, then the court, if that's the only thing potentially wrong with your parenting, then fantastic, because that's very, very fixable.
I think this is super timely because I think right now we're seeing more cases involving addiction and alcohol addiction than we have in the past. And I don't know if it's pandemic related, but it seems like many, many parents out there are really actually struggling and relapsing. And I know you are seeing this in some of your cases. When is it working out and when is it not? Anything to glean from those experiences?
Working out is kind of a loaded question, right? So I have a couple of cases now where the parties are both accusing each other of, not being responsible for their drinking. So they're doing SoberLink on a temporary basis. And, the judge very pragmatically said, do this until further order of the court, but please do this successfully so the state doesn't have to be involved in your drinking habits, essentially, and you can raise your kids together. So that's good, right? We're going to have two parents that are going to, show that they're minimally responsible. They'll be able to have an ordinary parenting time schedule. So that's working out. The other case that's working out is I have an opposing party who has failed to sign up for SoberLink a few times. She's failed to test cleanly when she is on it. So that's working out too, because those kids are safe. They're not in mother's care where she's passing out, and they're not, driving with her. So that's a tragic outcome. These kids are separated from their mother, but they're safe.
So if you are struggling, it is better to not try and cheat the family court system. Better to actually figure out how to get whatever treatment you need to be safe for your kids. And that's what you're going to hear from us as your family law attorney. We're going to recommend that you make different choices or different arrangements to make sure your kids are safe, because that's what allows us to best advocate for you.
Absolutely.
It's kind of a tough message, though. Many of our clients want us to kind of make it go away, and we can't necessarily do that.
Right. We can't make a DUI conviction go away, but we can show you the tools that you can use to demonstrate to the other party and to the court that you're no longer a danger, or maybe you are a danger. So you might have SoberLink for a long time, and as long as you accept that you're not going to have your kids when you're using, then your kids are safe.
I want to change directions for just a minute. If someone's ex gets a DUI, what should they do? This
is after a divorce is entered.
Yes, exactly.
So I would say if your ex has a history of drinking, I would recommend withholding the children and filing an emergency without notice for temporary custody, and allow the other party time to essentially prove that it was a one-time incident, or just where they are in their life, and maybe they have to sign for SoberLink or something. So that is definitely enough to file an emergency, I would think. And I don't think any police officer or any family court judge is going to stop you from withholding your children if you just learned about that. Now, if you hear about a DUI in November and you decide to start withholding the kids, the following July, then you've already, kind of undercut your own claims there. But I would say as soon as you hear about it, you need to file something.
This is such a fact specific situation. We had one situation where a client of ours at one point had her children returned to her, and they were being driven drunk, not by their parent, but by their parent's girlfriend. And one of the things that she should have done immediately was call the police and report the crime. So if you know about a crime very close, so there was no DUI there, but there was evidence. So we filed an emergency, and luckily there was enough evidence to get the emergency. But one of the things you want to think about when you are protecting your children is what evidence exists to prove what I know. And you don't really want to rely just on my kids told me X. So whenever possible, right. Under that circumstance, she really should have called the police and reported the crime, even if the police then went to interview, the other parents. You've got a record of what happened. So you really want to figure out, as much as you possibly can, what are the circumstances surrounding the DUI? What was the timing? How much danger are my kids in? And then, you're determining, am I withholding? Am I filing? And two attorneys and two judges might give you different answers. But I think your judgment's spot on.
Exactly. Again, don't use what your kids told you. Don't use what the neighbor told you. Try and get the police report. Try and talk to your ex about it. And these things are readily available online almost instantly after the arrest. So
I agree. And I think gathering police reports and medical records as you go is a good idea, especially if there's a history. When you go in and you say this is the third DUI, it means something different than, I got pulled over for the first time and was just over the limit and I made a mistake. It's a different story.
Absolutely.
Any other final parting words for people on DUIs, addiction? Besides
the consequences it would have in your family law case or your life in general, just don't drink and drive. It's incredibly easy to not drink and drive. We're doing this the same week that the player on the Raiders, who lost a friend in a drunk driving accident, apparently his airbag is deployed at 129 miles per hour. Killed a 23-year-old woman and her dog. So, those are, like his children's lives, his wife's lives, that family, that dog, like all those lives changed forever because he couldn't call an Uber or couldn't call a taxi. It's just unnecessarily evil.
I'm really just so glad that you brought that up, because don't wait until you're inebriated to make the decision or the plans. Decide right now, I'm going to call an Uber. And if you need modern law to buy your Uber, you just expense it and modern law will pay for your Uber, because really it is absolutely worth it. So think about it right now. Commit to it, Ryan. I think that was brilliant. Good parting words of wisdom.
Alrighty.
Thank you so much. And we'll talk again soon.
Until next time.
Bye.